last time Admiral Yi Sun-shin defeated the Japanese Navy at the Battle of Hansando. But the Admiral isn't done yet. He's back on the move in this week's episode of Japan at War. News of what had happened at Hansando had already reached the Japanese base at Busan in a couple of hours. Naval commanders Kuki Yoshitaka and Kato Yoshiaki set sail immediately with around 42 ships between them, but only went as far as the port of Angolpo. Their goal was to meet the Korean Navy in a place of their choosing, and still be close to base should they need to retreat. Yi Sun-sin's scout boats told him of the enemy's new location on August 15th. He set sail out of the coast of Koje Island and then went west towards Angolpo to verify. They were indeed there. As much as he wanted a direct assault, he also knew it wasn't a good idea. It was a small harbor with not a lot of room to maneuver in. On top of that, the tide was quite dangerous and threatened to sink his ships. So they did their favorite tactic. They sent in a few ships in and then retreated. Then they hoped to lure them out into open waters. But it didn't work. The Japanese ships stayed in place. Admiral Yi Sun-shin realized that their tactic was now known to the enemy. Instead, he decided that he would have to fight the enemy on their terms. He started the battle by sending in small groups, particularly against the larger Japanese ships. Eventually, sounds from the battle drew in Hideyoshis' navy, and he too showed up to reinforce his ally, and together they combined the Korean Navy and started to chip away at the Japanese. This battle lasted for several hours. The Japanese were determined to put an end to the Korean Navy and use small boats to gather the wounded and put them to shore, and then would use the same boats to row in fresh men to man the ships. They managed to hold on until sunset, and then they gave up the fight and made their escape into the nearby mountains. Yi Sun-sin made no attempt to send his men on land. Instead, he decided to leave a couple of boats intact for the Japanese. He feared that if he didn't leave them a way to escape, they would simply turn on the Korean citizens and then dig in, which at that point he had doubts that his men would be able to defeat them on land. That night, the Koreans left the ships, and then they returned the next morning, and the boats were gone. On the shoreline was evidence that the Japanese had cremated their dead before leaving. Within the next 2 days, Yi Sun-sin led his fleet east to the mouth of the Nakton River, and then back west. He found no sign of the enemy. The Japanese had hidden themselves in the sea caves of Koje Island, and then made their escape to Busan during the night. Both Kuki Yoshitaka and Kato Yoshiaki were among those that had escaped. With supplies now running low and the men exhausted, the Korean naval commanders decided to call off the search and head to their respective home ports. On their way back, they passed the small island where the 200 to 400 marooned Japanese survivors of the Battle of Hansando were sitting on the shoreline. Most were emaciated and going crazy from several days without food or water. Yi Sun-sin is supposed to have given the task of finishing them off to Won Gyun. Won is said to have failed at this task. When both Yi Sun-sin and Hideyoshi left the area to head back to their home ports, Won Gyun is said to have gotten false reports that a large Japanese navy was on its way and fled. With the tide now pushing to shore the wreckage of their destroyed ships, the Japanese were able to make rafts and make their way to Kojai Island, where they were able to finally find food. Hideyoshi, while these naval battles were happening, was getting reports of the losses. I would say at this time he realized that his navy was his biggest weakness, as he gave orders to halt all naval operations in the south coast, and had Naval Commander Todo Takatora move to reinforce his allies on August 23rd. By winning these battles, Yi Sun-sin was able to deny the Japanese entrance into the Yellow Sea, which, if you remember, was actually one of Hideyoshi's key strategies to being able to take China. With the way blocked, the Japanese would have to take supplies from Busan all the way to the border with China. Now that's close to 700 kilometers. Can you just imagine walking all the way from Busan to China? Well, this is where I will leave you. Another massive loss at sea. In the comments section down below, please tell me what you would have done differently if you were Hideyoshi and got reports that your navy was failing. And if you can, please make sure to like and share the video. I could really use your support. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload weekly, and subscribing is a great way to make sure you don't miss out. See you then.